I bought this Fox 38 off JensenUSA.com, so it comes in this super epic box. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you why it's the best fork I've ever rode, all things considered. So the first thing to consider is I paid $349. So if you go to the first comment and you're early, it's still there for $349. When I was looking at this fork on the internet, it was a bit of a mystery. I'm like, what am I going to get here? So unboxing it, we have the tried and true grip style damper. This is a really good damper for the money. So when you have this damper in a longer travel configuration, I've literally had zero complaints with it. It has the same lower arches as a normal retail Fox 38, the pinch bolt assembly, but it does come with a 6mm axle, not the quick release. So I'm desperately trying to find some variation, and there's no variation. So we have these little oil channels going up to the bleeder valves. So on any performance Fox 38 fork, you don't get the bleeder valves, you just have screws. So that one day at bike park a year, you can just basically unbolt those and release the pressure. So it has the same graphics as the Fox 36 Rhythm, but it is not a Fox 38 Rhythm. I'm actually trying to get a hold of a Fox 38 Rhythm right now, but they're kind of rare. After putting the serial number into the Fox website, it has a grip E-tune damper. So in this video, I'm going to do my best to uncover what a grip E-tune damper means. It has been a hot minute since I've been on a base level damper, so one good thing about the new 2024 grip damper, we have detents. So we have a full lockout on the bottom and then the full open in the normal position, but there's a couple clicks before you get to the lockout. One of my subscriber friends, Matt, reached out to me and he was like, check out this hack. You remember the old sweeper lever without detents? Well, it was a little frustrating, but Matt figured out that you can put a Fox 40 top cap on any sweeper lever and get the detent clicks. It's interesting that the only full lockout fork you can get from Fox is the absolute base model. So when you put that thing into lockout, it is like locked. The current fork on my bike is a 2021 Fox 38 with a Grip X damper. So it's a little bit interesting to be like downgrading my fork, but let me tell you, it's very important for you to ride your stuff right away when you buy it on the internet. So if there's any problems with it, you can return it or get a warranty. And you can ask me how I learned that the hard way. When I dived into the description of this mystery OEM edition Fox 38 Performance, there was nothing about the head crown. So let's stack it up. There's two variations when it comes to Fox 38s. They have a 68 head crown and a 58. So my 2021 here has the spray painted knobs that are black, and the new performance one has the blue knobs, and there's no variation. So grip E-tune damper doesn't have anything to do with the chassis. To better explain 57 versus 68mm head crown, the one on the left is a 2025 Grip X damper factory, and the one on the right is an E chassis. So that head crown is going to be a little bit wider, and it actually looks a lot better on certain frames because it goes flush with the frame. So it's wider, not thicker. So I haven't rode one, so I don't know which one is actually better. Testing out all the detent features on the performance fork, I was really impressed. In the fully firm mode, this thing is like an absolute rock. So I couldn't find any documents relating to how much you're going to damage the fork on going over bumps with that thing in the fully locked out position. So I just went to the fully open position. For one, I'm on an e-bike, and number two, you do need some traction when you are doing some technical climbing over ice. Getting up to a fire road, I put that fork into full lockout, identifying as an Amish mountain biker without a motor. So it is actually pretty uncomfortable with the fully locked out fork because the thing does not move. But if you were on an Amish bike, a non-motorized vehicle, you would really want this feature. It's kind of disappointing that most high-end Fox forks don't have a lockout. The Grip X damper does have a lockout on my fork, but it's a little bit fussy to get to. Demonstrating how rigid this suspension is fully locked out with the Vivid on the rear, it basically makes rigid bikes obsolete. So you could just lock this out and pretend like you're on a rigid bike. So this is a very big thing to consider when you're purchasing your new suspension, is how well do the lockouts work because if you're not on an e-bike, you really do need this feature on those nasty fire roads. Now on the first downhill, there was a nasty surprise right here. Basically, the hill was a sheet of ice. It was deceptively dry, but it's the middle of winter, so my mediocre riding will be a little bit downgraded for the remainder of the video, so I do not crash. But there was something special going on inside of that fork. So I headed back up to the top of the hill with a downgraded skill level so I don't crash, and here's how it went. Now I put the fork on the bike like 2 weeks ago, and I kind of forgot it had the grip e-tune damper inside of it. So on the first downhill, I was basically riding this blind, thinking this was just some entry-level base model placeholder that comes on brand new bikes. But no, there was something actually really special going on inside of this fork. So now I'm going to redo the little marketing from the Google AI, and it's definitely more friendly to heavyweight bikes. There's more sprung mass on the bike, meaning there's more weight in between the two wheels. So this thing eats chunks super good, but it does have this special touch. Good piece of suspension is a well-rounded piece of suspension. So taking this through a jump line, it does have the normal Fox 38 penalty in the jumping department. But honestly, there's something special about this fork. It's incredibly more comfortable than any Fox 38 I've ever rode, and I would easily put this into the top 5 forks I've ever rode at this point. Opting out of those greasy trails, going out for the loamers, because if there's leaves on the ground, that means that ice won't form quite as quickly. So this fork is not divey. I think everyone who's rode a Fox 36 Rhythm has experienced a wall of resistance or a divey mess. I'm not sure if it's the air spring or the damper, but all I can tell you, it has really good bump absorption and it's just really confident fork. It is an often rare experience when your suspension is perfectly dialed straight out of the box and all you did was pump it up with air pressure and get it right on your first rebound try. So I can confidently tell you it was not placebo effect. When you see that EMTB tune badge on your Fox 38, it's going to be a completely different experience, and might I say a better one. Reflecting back on my time and all the videos I made, this Kenevo SL had a grip 2 with the e-bike tune, and I thought it was one of the best forks I ever rode. After such an amazing experience, it was time to go for another ride. So the first thing you can expect out of these grip e-tune dampers, forget that it's a Fox 38. They're super comfortable when you're riding, like their small mid-bump absorption is just astronomical. It's almost like riding a coil fork. But once you do push deeper into it, it does become a little bit more progressive, like an air fork. So it's such a nice bump absorption, I'm pretty sure it saved me from 2 different crashes this day because it was super icy. You want to stick to these loamy trails when it's super iced over because the ice won't form underneath the leaves. So I buy a lot of suspension. I also borrow a lot from my friend Michael. He's the silent channel supporter. So I often fall into the marketing trap of I need to have at least a grip 2 damper on my bike. So if you just go into this blind not knowing really what's underneath you, you will really find what is the best. And you can just borrow stuff from your friend. You don't have to make your life out of it like me. So this grip e-bike tune damper is satisfactory for any style of riding I need to do. I'm really impressed at this point. With the riding options pretty limited in the middle of winter, I tried to go down the steepest trail I could to find something to fault this fork with, and I can tell you it doesn't dive. I think this is a lot to do with it having 170 millimeters of travel, while most Fox 36 Rhythms are 160. So 160 millimeter forks are notoriously the hardest to set up. Once you go up to 170, 180 is the best. As far as setup, there's just a lot of slop in the fork. But getting back to this 170 grip e-tune damper, I'm so impressed at this point. I'm gonna have to throw it on the table and rip it apart. One interesting note here, I put 120 psi in this fork on day 1, and in a couple days it went down to 110. That's because the air I put in there was at about 49, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and now it's about 20 degrees in the garage and I'm absolutely freezing. So there was an interesting thing on the back of the lower legs. There is some serious pressure buildup inside of these lower legs. So I only rode this for about 2 hours on 2 different occasions, but that massive temperature swing, I'm guessing, acts like an elevation change. So after I unscrewed the bleeder screws right here, the fork sucked down and it did stop bubbling. So before you complain about this fork not having bleeder valves, let's take a look at the Charger 3.1 ZEB fork. You have to do the same procedure, loosen these up to get the pressure out of the lower legs. Now we're about to look at something that's far more important than pressure buildup in the lower legs that makes this fork so incredible. And half the time I forget to press those bleeder buttons, so if your fork doesn't have these, I wouldn't stress it too much. I feel like Fox makes this a little bit confusing because we have e-bike. Is this e-bike chassis or is this e-bike tune inside of their dedicated setup guide? So we have the 170mm travel Fox e-bike fork and with 3 tokens installed from the factory.
2 or 3?
3 total tokens in this fork, so it's kind of interesting because on the Grip 2 damper I found that 2 tokens was the absolute magic number after experimenting with 3 tokens. So we have to go inside the damper and see what they got special sauce in there. Underneath the top cap we have these 2 ratcheting stars, and this is an absolute genius of engineering because there's no balls. Oftentimes you take these caps off and there's little detent balls inside of there and they typically go flying and it's an absolute nightmare and sometimes you can never find them. I tried to start on the air spring because typically it's substantially easier to work on than the damper, but sometimes things go in reverse. So I basically have a stuck down air spring condition, and in the last video, Fox 38 repair hacks, I just pulled the air spring and got it to equalize. So working on suspension is extremely dangerous and I'm lucky I didn't get hurt right here. Shout out to the bike shops and the bike mechanics that repair your suspension because it's pretty dangerous. So don't complain too much about the $200 price tag for a full overhaul in your Fox 38. If you ever run into this, you're just struggling super bad, just throw it on the bench and move on to something else. This is one of the best investments I ever made. It's a $200 set of shaft clamps off eBay with like every single common shaft clamp out there. I linked it in the description. So I'm removing the top cap and you don't have to spin it this many times. You just have to actually pull it up. Now this fork is a 2024 OEM edition, but they probably have a whole bunch of overstock of the 5-weight Teflon fluid. We can know it's Teflon fluid because it's white. You want to see red damper oil inside of there, because I personally think the Motor X new 4-weight oil that Fox uses is better, because I put it in another fork and it basically felt better to me, and that's my justification. Now looking at the compression assembly of the Grip 1 e-bike tune chassis, there is nothing different than a standard grip assembly. So this is where the magic happens inside of the compression damper. This is where all the money is. Basically on the bottom, the rebound assembly is not quite as sophisticated. When you have a more fancier one of these, basically the fork feels better. Diving into the main piston, this is the tiny Grip 1. If you get the Grip X2, it has a substantially bigger piston, and all the brands are doing this from DVO to RockShox. There's nothing wrong with this antiquated technology because personally I just rode it for 2 days and it works really good. So this fork has a very simple shim stack, and I personally wouldn't know the difference, but fortunately I have a bag of broken parts, and one of them is a old grip compression assembly out of a Fox 36 Rhythm that I broke a couple years ago. Here's both compression assemblies out on the table. I guess the sticker on the side of the fork says it all. It's just a slight tune change. It's not a hardware change per se. I thought maybe something would be different, but the one on the top is a 2021 Fox 36 Rhythm compression assembly that I broke a couple years ago. So right here we have 4 identical washers, and I honestly thought this fork was okay, satisfactory riding, but not that great. We zoom in on the shim stack on the bottom, that's the E-Tune Fox 38 one, and I thought this fork was absolutely phenomenal. So we have 3 of the same shims, and then we have 1 tiny one. Shim, the smaller shims means it's for high speed, it's harder to deflect off that. So 1 tiny 5-cent washer makes the fork absolutely incredible. If you're ever struggling to take this clip out of your air spring, you're going to use 2 tiny screwdrivers and play chopsticks with it. So I did struggle with this for like 15 minutes before I threw it on the table, picked it back up, took me about 5 seconds to get it back out. I have no idea why there is so much grease inside of these forks that comes straight out of the factory. Now this is an exceptionally dangerous area. We have a stuck down air spring, and I do want to take this apart and clean off all the grease off of the main piston or the actual air spring assembly. So I almost hurt myself doing this earlier, so I gotta think of a new plan. And once again, working on suspension is extremely dangerous. Now I'm going to reuse all these O-rings, so I did take off all the O-rings that were exposed, and I'm not sure if you're supposed to use an Ugga to work on suspension, but it works super good on Loctited components that you just had to torch free. Now at this point I got kind of scared. I'm like, is this thing going to explode into the roof? So I put my head out of the way and there was no blow off like a stuck down air shock, fortunately. I don't want to shame Fox. I'm only about constructive criticism once again. So someone please tell me why there's so much grease on this air spring. Now I do believe this was the contributing factor to this air spring being in the stuck down position. The ports were basically clogged inside of the isolation sleeve that the air spring sits in. There's so much grease on here, I'm actually going to collect it and put it into my jar of slick honey because the stuff's a little bit expensive. I'm not going to put the Fox 38 back together because I have some big plans for it in the next couple videos. Here is a long list of all the forks I've criticized over the years. So I punched in the Fox 38 grip E-tune. We get 4 stars on the air spring, 5 stars on the chassis. If you have a Kashima coated, I put 6 stars. Even though I don't like Kashima coating, it is a cool little flex. Now the grip E-tune, because of the E-tune, the 5-cent washer, the damper stays at 5 stars. So this is making me questioning every choice I've ever made. I used to think you needed high-speed compression adjust, but really you just need a 5-cent washer or shim stack inside of your damper. The capability, everything is the same as the factory 38, but the setup goes to 6 stars. So this score is 39 out of 40. Now the best fork I ever rode was definitely the Öhlins with a perfect score of 40. And if you want to see where the Fox 38 factory lines up, you're going to have to click this video on your screen to see where it lands.